Hello, I'm G. Geronimo, and this is Rappler Talk. It's been 5 days since motor tanker Princess Empress capsized in the waters of Naujan, Oriental Mindoro, while carrying 800,000 liters of industrial oil. The sunken tanker spilled oil that has already spread to shores along multiple towns in Oriental Mindoro, even reaching Kaluya in Antique. Experts from the UP Marine Science Institute estimate that 20,000 hectares of coral reef, 9,900 hectares of mangroves, and 6,000 hectares of seagrass in 21 cities and municipalities may be affected by the oil slick, which could reach as far as Palawan. Today, we're talking to Attorney Lisa Osorio, Legal and Policy Director of Environmental Group Oceana. Hello, Lisa. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, G. I am Adlaw. Good day to everyone.
Salamat sa pagsama po sa amin ngayong umaga. Actually, in Oceana's March 3 statement, Oceana called on the national government to immediately implement the mechanism and actions to stop further damage in affected areas after this spill. I just wanted to start with that kasi anong kinds of mechanisms and actions were you referring to in this statement?
Yeah. So when it comes to oil spills, well, the immediate action would be to contain. So containment and to ensure that the oil spill will not spread further and damage ecosystems further. So that's the immediate measure that is should be taken. But at the same time, Oceana is also calling on the government to conduct immediately an investigation to look into the proximate cause of the incident, and also to take into account not only the things that can be done to prevent it, but also to hold accountable those that are responsible for this unfortunate incident.
Mhm. I'm actually curious po ako, ano po yung, when you first heard of the news, ano po yung naging reaction even in your, in Oceana, or even with you, Lisa, ano yung naging unang reaction mo when you heard that something like this happened of Oriental Mindoro?
Yeah, parang oh no, parang that's the last thing that we want to happen, especially the area that is affected. Mindoro is part of the Verde Island Passage, because Verde Island Passage, as if you must have heard about it, it's called the Amazon of the seas, kasi it's the center of marine shorefish biodiversity, as been discovered and already published by Dr. Ken Carpenter and colleagues years ago. That's
Mhm.
why we look in this area with a special concern, because this is a highly ecologically sensitive area, and for this to happen, this is so unfortunate, because we know that the impacts would be greater than what we imagine. So it's unfortunate, really.
Mhm. As we speak right now, authorities are racing to contain the spread of the oil spill. But it's been 5 days since the incident. What kind of environment damage are we looking at? I'm sure 5 days, marami nang pwedeng nangyari din at this
Mhm.
point. Ano yung extent of the damage kaya?
Yeah, so the damage can really be extensive, no? Physical damage, kasi the oil can coat wildlife and habitats. So when it comes to the wildlife, it can clog the gills of fish, and also the marine invertebrates. It can damage the feathers of birds and fur of mammals. So this oil is actually a toxic chemical also. So it also can be harmful to humans if contaminated seafood is consumed. So
Mhm.
essentially, the damage of the oil spill is that it would cause a disruption of the marine ecosystem, can harm the food of other organisms, and even make a cascade up to the food web. So maraming affected talaga. So economic, tourism, fisheries, and we know that Oriental Mindoro, which is a directly affected area, has already a lot of locally managed protected areas, marine protected areas, and so they're really advanced already in their coastal management efforts. So it's really unfortunate, because the cleanup will be very, very expensive, and the damage would actually be felt even for decades.
Mhm. Actually, you talked about yung impact nito on animals and
Mm-hmm.
on human health. So it's not just the environment but also potentially the health of people. Kaya nga 'di ba, even those who are involved in the cleanup, they're being made to, dapat merong precautionary measures, merong PPE, merong they have to handle the cleanup well also.
Mhm.
But let's go back to yung 'di ba, ang warning ng UPMSI is that ganitong kadaming mangroves, seagrass, and even mga corals na pwedeng
Mm.
ma-damage nitong oil spill na 'to. Gaano ba ka-importante yung these three to the marine ecosystem of the Philippines? And of course, we all know that the Philippines is one of the most biodiverse countries in the
Mhm.
world. So, gaano ka laking bagay na this oil spill threatens itong mga natural resources na ito?
Yeah, malaking bagay 'to for the Philippines 'no, because, the Philippines is one of the parang, konting countries in the world that has, these three major marine ecosystems, yung mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrasses. And, these three ecosystems actually contribute so much to, the productivity of our seas, yung fisheries natin. Kasi ito yung mga habitats, ito yung mga bahay ng ating mga isda, ng ating mga aquatic resources, yung mga shellfish. And so if merong ganitong insidente, maapektuhan ang mga mangroves eh. So parang kung mangroves lang, for example, yung matatakpan yung ugat nila ng oil, and it would cause their slow death. And kung mawala kasi yung mangroves, that means, the ecosystem services that we enjoy from mangroves for for protecting or for protecting us from storm surge, for instance, for also ensuring that there's productive fisheries kasi ito yung mga nursery grounds ng ating mga maliliit na isda. That's really, a huge impact. And idagdag pa natin yung seagrass na kung saan habitat din ito ng fisheries tulad ng, for instance, paborito nating danggit. So hindi lang kasing ganun kadali to also restore this kung masisira na siya, kasi it would take years and decades to also restore them. So ang maganda sana is to keep them intact, to keep them protected. Kaya kami sa Oceana is always calling for protection of these marine resources.
Mhm. Right. And actually, 'di ba, marine protected areas talaga itong mga affected nitong oil spill na 'to. Meron ba yung impact na, I mean, kung bakit marine protected areas 'tong maapektuhan? Meron bang magagawa? May resources ba na pwedeng ilabas para tulungan yung mga communities na affected para kumbaga makasagot or masolusyonan itong ating problema ngayon?
Yeah, well, since they are locally declared as marine protected areas, syempre yung direct responsibility no is with the local government units.
Mhm.
Pero sa protection of this marine protected areas, and when it comes to the resources, it depends on gaano rin kadami yung resources ng local government units
Mm.
kasi we know that these are it's not really first class municipalities, no? Meron sigurong konti pero limited din ng resources ng ating mga local government units. Verde Island Passage in general has been for decades been always called for its parang stricter protection as a nationally marine protected area. So parang mako-cover na siya sa NIPAS, yung National Protected Area
Mhm.
Systems natin in the Philippines. Pero hindi pa siya nangyayari kasi. So that means kasi yung extra layer of protection, extra resources perhaps that we can get if it is nationally marine protected areas, it's not there yet. So when it comes to resources to offset what the community has lost in this tragedy is really would come from different sources, like it could come from national government agencies kasi kailangan parang whole of the nation approach ito kasi marami, widespread ang epekto ng oil spill,
Mhm.
maraming mga tao ang affected. The resources may not just come from one entity. Dapat andun yung DNR, perhaps andun yung Bureau of Fisheries and other agencies na pwedeng mag-contribute para to alleviate the losses.
Right. And I know Oceana is really one of the groups calling for this national protection of our marine resources, di ba? Um,
Yes.
so just going back to the oil spill, what's the worst case scenario that we're looking at? Ano kaya yung kapag hindi natin to na ibsan or hindi tayo umaksyon agad, what's the worst that could happen?
Well, immediate talaga is loss of livelihood. Kasi I think in fact, I saw the news na hindi na inaalaw yung mga fisher folk to fish, you know. And these are, kasi pag municipal fisher folk ang sinasabi natin, there are subsistence,
Mm,
fishing. So, parang pang araw-araw lang talaga, no? Kung anong kuha nila ngayong araw, yun ang kakainin nila at yun yung source ng kanilang mabilhan ng pagkain. So, yun ang immediate na kailangan tugunan ng ating gobyerno. Of course, the other immediate thing is to ensure that there's rapid response para the the oil spill will not spread further and it would be contained. Kaso
mhm,
mahirap yan because we're talking of a dynamic environment. In fact,
mhm,
ngayon, di ba, with the currents, meron ng projection ang ang UPMSI as to saan siya pupunta. So baka yun, tingnan natin, look at the science, tingnan natin where to put in, the defensive measures para hindi na siya mag-affect pa ng mga areas na kung saan siya papunta and just contain it. And then in that area where oil spill is contained, of course, cleanup, remediation activities should be done so to disperse the oil. Pero yun nga, we're talking about barrels, millions of barrels of oil. So
mhm.
yun yung kailangan natin bigyan ng o tuunan ng plano. Yung ano ba talagang plano ng government? Kasi parang ngayon, nagre-react lang tayo. Hindi tayo nagpa-plan ahead.
Mhm. Actually, na-mention niyo po na meron nga yung UPMSI, meron siyang projection. There are actually different scenarios on where the
Mhm.
oil spill can go or where it can spread depending on weather directions. Would it be an overreach kung like we prepare for all these three scenarios or ano ba yun? Would that extend the resources or
Yun naman.
ganun
Kasi
ba? Do you
with
recommend that?
yeah, it's not overreach. It's really
Mhm.
taking the precautionary approach, 'di ba? And preparing for that scenario is, I think, also would require resources. But there are parang mga organic or ano tinatawag nila, parang booms that they can make out of organic materials
Mhm.
naman. Hindi naman siya ganun dapat expensive. And I'm sure, our agencies also are equipped already. I think
Mhm.
with those necessary equipment that are needed to contain or to put in some defensive measures against possible spread of the oil spill.
Right. But how long do you think it will take to clean up an oil spill of this magnitude? And is there a window before this becomes unmanageable?
I really can say now because we can just see that there has been very very few oil spills in the
Mhm,
world that has that we can learn from. Yung pinaka sikat na oil spill is really yung sa Exxon Valdez oil spill in Canada. It took them decades to clean up. So decades, we're talking about tens, di ba, of 10
mhm,
years or so. So um yung isa nga, the first really oil spill that really happened that actually compelled the world to think about liability for oil spill happened in England. And what they did actually, because they couldn't contain it already, this was in the 1960s. They had to explode, they had to eh, put in explosives para ma-burn off, to took the ship to the high seas and explode it para lang matapos yung problema. But I think that is not, how we
mhm,
do things now. Kasi that was 1960s and we didn't know much about it. So
mhm,
what is being done is really to do bioremediation measures. Yun nga, to disperse the oil, you need some chemical, parang mga chemicals yan na ni-spray para to spread. Pero kasi minsan yung mga ganun, nasa surface lang yan. What is happening kasi nasa bottom of the sea siya, no?
right.
Paano mo siya i-contain? So yung nasa baba. So yun yung kailangan din i-address. And I think some of the organizations are talking about perhaps helping in inspecting perhaps the damage. And mag-uusap pa yung mga iba't ibang organizations like us, Greenpeace, Center for Ecology and Energy Development, SEED. Mag-uusap-usap pa rin kami on how we can assist, provide our technical support.
Mhm. How about the resources, ma'am? Parang how long will it take yung mga at least yung na-damage na? And hopefully it really does not cause sobrang extensive na damage. But how long does it take to recover such natural resources that we lost to this disaster?
Well, if take for example, if yung mangroves na namatay siya because 'di ba na essentially kasi unless maalis mo yung coating ng oil sa kanya, 'di ba, hindi na siya makakapag wala nang breathing mechanism yung mangrove. So if you say, mamamatay yung mga mangroves, you have to plant, you have to regrow mangroves. And hindi yan madali. That would take, at least 1 decade or two para you can bring it back to its original, cover. So, forest cover. So, yun yung mahirap. Kasi, kaya nga sabi natin, as much as possible, we'd like to prevent uh, these kinds of things from happening.
Mhm.
Kasi ang response talaga and recovery will take a long, long time.
Right. Let's talk about the Verde Island Passage,
Mhm.
dubbed, yun nga, sabi mo, the center of marine biodiversity in the world. So prior to this incident, actually, there have already been conservation efforts
Mhm.
already in the area to combat threats of illegal and destructive fishing practices, pollution, unsustainable
Mhm.
land use, tsaka irresponsible tourism. So how does this oil spill exacerbate the situation there? And you also mentioned that it's an ecologically sensitive area. What makes it an ecologically sensitive area that we should really look out for right after this incident?
Yeah, when I say ecologically sensitive, kasi parang Verde Island Passage really is the highest in biodiversity. Parang pinakamarami siyang klaseng isda, klaseng mga aquatic resources na nandyan. So, kung maapektuhan siya, hindi natin alam, hindi pa nga natin nadidiscover yung ibang mga wildlife na
Mm.
nandyan. So, it's really like the last frontier for us. Kasi kailangan natin talaga tingnan. Pero yun nga, since alam natin, we recognize how important it is to our country, to the entire world even. Kasi, parang ito yung bangko ng ating mga klase-klaseng isda na nandito sa ating bansa and sa buong mundo. Um, it's really important for us to protect it. Kaya ecologically sensitive. And then marami na ning mga threats dyan, di ba? Like the threats from pollution, as you said, the threats from destructive, fishing activities, illegal commercial fishing coming in. And then kaya kami actually have been talking about it lately is because the threats of the infrastructure that is planned to be built there, which are liquefied natural gas infrastructures, which will cause, we know will cause an impact to this ecologically sensitive environment. So, yun yung tinitingnan namin. Kaya yung call talaga namin is, yes, we need to recognize its importance as a center of marine resources biodiversity, and also put in the requisite measures that should be in place. Declare it as a protected area under our national laws, and also ensure that there are management mechanisms in place already. Kasi parang ngayon, fragmented eh. May isang province doing a good job in protecting, like Mindoro, ang dami nilang locally small MPAs. Batangas, meron din naman, pero hindi sila masyadong nag-uusap with each other kasi
Mhm.
maraming provinces, there are 4 provinces involved here. So, parang kailangan natin ng parang coordinated, collaborative approach to protect this area. And so may efforts naman before, but hindi siya na sustain kasi syempre kailangan din natin with the changes in ating administration, minsan din the NGOs that were there before can no longer support the efforts of government na sana government should have continued. Yun yung mga maraming factors when it comes to management of an area as big as this. So, yun, I think with a protection at the national level, meron kasi kang parang overarching framework for each protection. So yun yung pinanawagan namin for this area sa.
Do you think after this incident, mas lalo pa nating mapapalakas yung call for that protection, that national protection for the Verde Island Passage?
Yeah, kasi our call is to protect it and to recognize that climate change is also going to exacerbate the threats that are already existing there. Yeah, so if we protect them, protect these areas through a national law, and then ensure management mechanisms so that when we plan for its management, pag-isipan na natin, we think twice about, for instance, hosting those LNG terminals in
Mm.
Verde Island. Kasi we know na hindi dapat doon. Bakit doon nilalagay yung lahat ng mga... At saka, we also have to think about, in this age of climate crisis, parang we don't be dependent on, oil and natural gas already. We think about renewable energy. And so parang we have to shift our mindset towards more sustainable future for that area.
Right. I'll ask about that later. But just to go back to the environmental laws, what do our environmental laws say about disasters like this? And are our laws rather strong enough to run after those responsible?
Yeah, the Philippines has a very strong legal framework for ensuring strict liability for oil pollution damage. So marami tayong batas. Meron tayong amended Fisheries Code RA 10654 that actually criminalizes or penalizes aquatic pollution. Meron tayong Clean Water Act, the same. Ganun din. And then we have also oil pollution law or for damage from oil spills where the ship owner will be held liable for damages, which will include reasonable expenses for cleanup operations, for preventive measures, and even the consequential loss of earnings suffered by those directly affected, and economic loss of earnings sustained by the people and the property contaminated, and damage to human health. So marami tayong batas actually. It's just a matter of enforcing it and
Mm.
ensuring that there would be accountability of those responsible. Kasi alam natin, when we analyze, ano ba yung proximate cause ng damage? It was engine trouble, di ba? So, the engine trouble, if you look at, in our laws, it has something to do with the seaworthiness of the vessel. It should not have been allowed to leave port, di ba? If it was rather inspected
Mhm.
by those responsible for inspecting it. So that's why we call on the PCG, Marina, even the BFAR and the DNR to ensure that we enforce the strict accountability measures and ensure that the ones responsible will be held accountable.
Mhm. Oceana again also called for an immediate investigation into the incident. What should that investigation look into, and who can be held accountable after all this clean up and lahat po ng nangyari that affected our natural resources?
Yeah, so investigation into the oil spill, and then investigate who is responsible. Also determine the losses,
Mhm.
and there's a way of accounting for those losses, and ensure that cases will be filed against those responsible.
Mhm. Okay. And the government should initiate this if cases should be filed, if cases would be filed against
Mhm.
this those who are responsible. Um, so ito po in this incident, actually environmental groups are saying that this is also a wake up call to lessen our dependence on fossil fuels, including
Mhm.
oil and gas. So that yun nga yung usapin ng ating energy sources and how it is linked to climate change. What can we learn from this incident? And papaano natin pwedeng simulan na or kumbaga i-fast track yung ating to lessen the dependence on oil and gas?
Yeah. Actually, meron na tayong parang this is an opportune time for the government to do that. Kasi renewable energy laws and policies are already present for us to fast track our adoption of more renewable energy sources, and hindi na tayo much we will not focus our attention on dependence on fossil gas, like natural gas or liquefied nat gas and coal, 'di ba? So meron na tayong trajectories na nakikita na the Philippines is really ready to adopt renewable energy. Kaso lang, when it comes to our Philippine Energy Plan, parang ini-increase pa na nila yung parang fossil gas natin by 2030, by 2040. Parang taliwala sa ating
Mm.
nationally determined contributions sa Paris Agreement. Now we have to at least cut down on our greenhouse gas emissions. So I think parang mismatch yung anong nasa plano ng Energy Department and ano yung kinocommit natin through our other departments of ours. So
Mm.
kailangan mag-usap, kailangan i-harmonize nila yung kanilang actions kasi yun nga, minimize our dependence on fossil gas na kasi iba na yung mundo natin, and if we don't do anything now, it might be too late.
Right. So it's been just 5 days and babantayan pa natin to. This could go on for days, weeks maybe. Oceana, ano po ang babantayan nyo mismo during for this incident?
Yeah, of course, we'll look closely as we will talk with other groups, other civil society organizations, and on what we can do. We're not just here to critique the government; we're also here
Mm.
to also support if they need our support, because we have our expertise in this area as
Mhm.
well. And so babantayan namin, we'll look at how government will react to this, if cases have been filed, sana we'll call them out if wala silang ginawa on that aspect. Kasi klaro yung ating mga batas that the one responsible, the persons responsible for this should be held accountable. So I think it's high time that there should be strict accountability para we'll have the rule of law, especially in this country. And transparency. So sana
Mm.
there will be transparency on their side kasi we need to know anong nangyayari, and cannot just be allowed to remain silent and quiet and
Mhm.
then hope that it will all go away. It will not.
Mhm.
So yeah, so yun yung hopes namin for the next few
So far,
weeks.
what are we seeing? Are we seeing transparency from the government side?
Ah, I'm not sure. Kasi
Mhm.
yung mga news comes from different sources eh. It's not, there's
Mhm.
no like parang control, di ba? Control tower from the government saying all these reports. Parang iba-iba
Mhm.
yung sources. I haven't heard PCG. I know they're very busy in the containment.
Mhm.
PCG is directly responsible. I heard, news from TNR who took picture of the spread of the oil spill. Pero walang control tower eh for
Mhm.
this incident of this magnitude. In other countries kasi ganun eh, parang pag ganitong kalaki na incident, meron talagang isang boses yung gobyerno, di ba, na naririnig
Mhm.
natin. And everything, all the reports flow from there. So,
Mhm.
ngayon, iba-iba eh. It comes from civil society, it comes from, di ba, other sources. So, yun lang
Right.
ang parang we hope that the government, will step up on its role.
Mhm.
Especially now, with this at this critical moment um in our history.
Right. And yung panawagan nyo nga rin kanina that they should continue listening to science. So far, they have
Mm.
been cooperating with the UPMSI, really tapping into experts, projecting kung saan yung pwedeng abutin ng oil spill. But I agree na yun, dapat nga meron ngang isang boses para hindi mag-cause ng confusion, hindi siguro mag-cause ng panic, I guess,
Yeah.
especially in the communities directly affected by
Mm.
it na hindi naman talaga nakaka-access dito sa mga information na to, but are seeing for themselves yung extent ng oil spill sa kanilang komunidad. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
right. Salamat po. Salamat pa sa pagsama sa amin, Attorney Lisa. At we have been we enjoyed talking to you, and na-enlighten talaga kami sa mga laws na kailangan nating tingnan ng mabuti, and what we should lobby for, especially yung national protection ng ating mga marine protected areas. We've been
Thank you so much.
We've been talking to Attorney Liza Osorio about the Oriental Mindoro oil spill and its impact on Philippine waters. Follow our coverage of the oil spill. We have Dwight De Leon and Lawrence Pasion reporting from the ground. We have a live updates page you can bookmark and refresh. I'm G. Geronimo, and this has been Rappler Talk.